High schools probably make up that 39. Under-resourced communities with children that are primarily non-white, right? Now, the gospel, we should be able to say that in a Christian church because the gospel is supposed to make the two one new man in Christ, right? So it should be okay to say what distinguishes us, not divides us, right? But the reality is we got a problem, y'all. We're graduating kids and they're not college ready, they're not career ready, and they're not military ready. You know what they are ready? They're crime ready and they're jail ready. All right. And so let me say one other thing. I preached a funeral today of a young man who was gunned down in our city. I'm preaching a funeral tomorrow morning of my own cousin, 19-year-old girl who was 6 months pregnant, who was gunned down. I'm sick of that. That's one big reason why I think we need to be very diligent and aware and alert as it relates to policies and laws that govern education, because they're building prisons based off of how well or not well we do school. There's a trajectory there's a thread that we can see very easily. And so I would like for us tonight to discuss the three things that you all will see in the coming days. We wrote a letter from Black Pastors United for Education to our governor asking for three specific things. Number one, that public schools would be properly funded and that we could have a robust conversation amongst different people within the community to make sure that our public schools are properly funded. Public schools are the backbone and foundation for education in America. To disregard the public school is not a responsible thing to do. But to think that just doing one thing or another thing is going to fix everything, I don't think that's the right thing. I think we have to comprehensively look at how public schools are funded and come up with a game plan that is sustaining and that's working for all of the children in our public schools. So that's number one. Can we have a robust conversation? Let's include clergy. Let's include the business people. Let's include the nonprofit sector. Let's include different people, bring them to the table and come up with a robust plan to properly fund public schools. Number two is lifeline scholarships. And I'll let our lawmakers and those who are on the panel discuss what that is, but fundamentally it would give parents and children that are in the bottom 15% in the state of Pennsylvania a voucher system that they could go to the school of their choice and have public funds in order to do that, right? And then number three, that we would cease and desist any conversation of cutting funds for charter schools or cyber charter schools, given that charter schools and cyber charter schools are the only other affordable option for parents that desire for their kids to go to any other school besides the local public school, which primarily charter schools and cyber charter schools are primarily made up of non-white students from under-resourced communities. So to cut funding for our charter schools and cyber charter schools is to directly cut the opportunity for those who want a different option, right? Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's what we're asking the governor to consider. And so we would like those who are on the panel this evening to speak to those three issues. I'd like to start with public funding for public schools and what it means to properly fund public schools. And since our dear brother Justin Fleming, you were grabbing the mic before it was ready, but now it's ready. I didn't teed it up for you. Here's what I'm asking very pointedly. Not from the position of your party, but from the position of being an expert or at least knowledgeable in this. Please tell this congregation, what does properly funding public school education look like to you?
So I can't really answer that question because the truth is we've never really done it. And so let me just set the table. Thank you, Pastor Robertson, for this opportunity. Thank you, Pastor, for hosting us here at Goodwin Memorial. I appreciate the opportunity to serve on this panel and talk about these serious issues. I am an unabashed advocate for public education, right up front. I will say it. I was educated in public school. I went to a public university. My children are in the Susquehanna Township School District. But that said, I am in favor, as a former child advocate. I was a mental health and child advocate for 12 years before joining the General Assembly. I want what's best for kids. Period, point blank, end of story. And when we have this conversation, right, about educational options, I truly do not know what adequately funding education looks like, because we have not done it. And what I do know is that the Commonwealth Court has given us a permission structure for the first time to adequately fund education. And what I do know is that the majority party of on the Basic Education Funding Commission has set forth a path to get us close to adequately funding public education.
And what does that path look like?
So this has to be negotiated and passed as part of the budget. So this is, and I know you said remove party, but this is the House Democrats' view based upon the Basic Education Funding Commission, because the way we did the commission this year is the majority party did a report and the minority party did a report. So in the majority party's report, there were several elements of, number one, historic education funding of $1.1 billion. As part of that was they did a calculation of basically taking the most successful school districts, the public school districts that had the highest level of student performance and student achievement, and basically assessing what those schools spent. And you can imagine where those schools are, right? The Philadelphia suburbs, the Lower Marions, the Council Rocks in Bucks County. And there's a larger narrative at play here as well, which I'll get into in just a second. But, you know, they basically took that formula and said, okay, what do the most successful schools spend? And then they did a calculation to get to what the rest of the school districts spend. And there will be an adequacy gap that is made up over 7 years. So, for example, I looked at this today. So for example, I'll take my home school district, Susquehanna Township. In the funding, in that funding proposal, if it were to pass, Susquehanna Township School District would get an additional $8 million a year, or I'm sorry, $2 million a year, $2.5 million a year over 7 years. So it's a 7-year scale up to that level. What we've also done in the past couple of fiscal years is something called Level Up, which was take the 100 most underfunded school districts and give them additional resources as well, so we could bring them up. And then that funding level was built into their base for the following year. And all of this is based on one more principle that I'll talk about called hold harmless. So, and that's what, there's been a big debate in terms of policy over hold harmless, because part of a school district's calculation of what they get in terms of state funding every year in the basic education funding formula has been enrollment, student enrollment. So, you know, so that means if you are losing students, then you are supposed to get less funding. If you are gaining students, then you are supposed to get more funding. But we have this provision called hold harmless, which means no school district can get less than what they got the year before. So what are we doing? That means we are funding, and we have been funding school districts that are actually losing students, public school districts that are losing students, you know, over the past decade and a half or so. So we're seeing areas where population's decreasing, but they are getting as much money or more than they got in the prior year because of hold harmless. And so if we were to rejigger that whole formula, there would be winners and losers. There would be school districts that would get less funding and school districts that would get more to account for the population shift across the state. But nobody wants to vote.
We stop at the discussion on the dollars, and we don't talk about all of the other issues that make a good school district and a bad school district a bad school district, right? We look at, again, the numbers in Pennsylvania that you mentioned earlier, where I thought we were 7th in the nation, but we're 8th in the nation, and that's fine, and 22,000 a student and so forth. At what point do you expand and say we are funding education adequately? We could argue that we should fund it more, but when are we going to start talking about the issues that really come down and make a difference in the school district and the life of these children? Because until we're willing to sit and I wrote down here what makes the difference. I can't tell you what the number is, but what I can tell you is if you don't have a clear goal and a clear outcome, if you don't have a clearly stated, we will die until we get 33 school districts from that 0 that you mentioned earlier and 6 school districts from 0. If we don't set those clear objectives, then we can spend all the money in the world that we want to. If we don't have any direction, we're not taking care of these kids. So I realize it's a little bit of a deviation from what you raised. And yes, we do have to talk about school funding. And yes, we do have to talk about, the fact that property taxes may or may not be the best way to fund public education. I think it has to be a part of it. But state funding obviously has to be a big part of it as well. Because on the other end of that, you get people losing their homes because the taxes keep going up to fund the schools. So at some point, we really do have to open up our eyes and say, look, it's not all about funding. There are a lot of other issues. And maybe when you're 8th in the nation in spending, maybe those other issues are even more important than the amount of money that you're tossing in that direction. But the bottom line is if we're going to increase the amount of money we're spending, we better have clear goals, clear outcomes, and we better take a look at the other issues that matter.
Thank you, Pastor. Just a really quick retort. So we're being told, Treasurer, that we're not funding our schools adequately. The Commonwealth Court has told us that. There is we have a constitutional mandate, the state does, to provide a, quote, thorough and efficient system of public education. The Republican-controlled Commonwealth Court told us we have not met that responsibility. The state has not met its obligation. So we can figure out, there's a lot of discourse and debate to be had about where the numbers are or where that lies, but that is what we have been told. So that's who is saying we're not adequately funding it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I say, I agree with that. The court ruling's there. I'm not sure there was a lot of definition behind the ruling. But what I'm saying is, as we move forward to try to figure out what that number is, we need to understand why we are spending and how we are spending. And that is what I have long seen as not being a part of the discussion.
Elder Charles Mitchell.
Josh, you know, I think I was about to say something, and I have to kind of correct myself because I'm reminded that we're in a church. I was going to say, sorry, I'm not going to say anything bad, and I have to say,
It sounded like it, brother.
all right, you guys got to understand, I'm a Presbyterian. This is very different from how my church works. All the clapping and all the happiness, like this is great. I think I might want to come back. Would that be okay, Pastor?
This is Chocolate Church 101, my brother. Look,
I love it.
Trying to help you. Look, trying to help you.
No, but Josh, what I was going to say is, look, I agree. We should have bipartisan compromise, and of course, the Commonwealth Court ruled. What I was going to say, because this is what I would normally say in the course of my daily work, working on public policy, which I think is, the other reason you invited me here, is what hasn't yet been said is that money that we're all talking about belongs to you. Now, then I thought, well, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. I'm not my own. So maybe I'll correct the statement a little bit, right? None of this money belongs to us, right? It all comes from him.
Yeah.
But he has entrusted it to us. Would that
Yes.
be correct?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So I
We're
got my
stewards.
theology straight. Now I'll give you my public policy. In my judgment, if that's true, a adequate, fair way to fully fund education will be to entrust the money to you and to parents and to children and to students. And that's one of the things, Pastor Robertson, that you mentioned. And one of the things that is up for debate as part of a bipartisan compromise is to say, shouldn't more of the money that is allocated to public education be decided upon by parents or by grandparents or whoever the caregiver is of a child? And that would be that idea that Pastor Robertson brought up of a $10,000 scholarship to go to whatever school you see fit. Is that all of the answer? I don't think it's all of the answer. But the element that I would add, you asked, is there an element that you would add that hasn't been brought up yet? Is, yeah, we need bipartisan compromise. Yeah, we need to comply with the court ruling. As part of that, we should not, and I respect our lawmakers in Harrisburg and those who want to be lawmakers in Harrisburg, they shouldn't make all the decisions for you. You should have the ability to direct some of that money as you see fit.
So if I understand you correctly, you just named three things. Number one is,
I told you I was a Presbyterian.
yes, and a preacher, obviously. So could you tell us those three? I know the one is allowing parents, those who are guardians, to direct some of the funding. Number two is comply with the court's ruling.
Yes, which the representatives both referenced.
And then number three was
Bipartisan compromise.
bipartisan compromise.
Yeah.
So
Right. This is Pennsylvania. We have to do that.
okay. State Representative Dave Mattson, were you about to say something?
Yeah, just real quick. I think it's kind of maybe a hybrid between the two answers here provided by my friends. But I do get a little frustrated sometimes that I feel like we have these conversations in silos. The question ultimately is, I don't know if you can put a dollar amount. What is it going to take to raise a kid in poverty? What are the resources that it's going to take? And there's a couple of things I always say. If there's three major pillars in a child's life, and if two of these three things are not doing great, the child will struggle. One is the family and the at-home situation. Two is the neighborhood. Three is the school district. If two of those things aren't functioning at their highest capacity, the kid's got a long road ahead of them. So, in my opinion, as we're talking about the education funding and compromises on how to achieve what it takes to get a child a 21st century education and catching them up post-COVID, we need to talk about resources that can go into the home to help those families that are struggling. And we've got to figure out how to revitalize our neighborhoods. I'm not talking about gentrifying them, in an equitable way that all people come up as the community grows as well. And I'd like to have all three conversations happening simultaneously as we have this conversation and in this budget.
So can I ask a pointed question then? So if that be the case, if we have to improve the home, the neighborhood, and the school, what would you say are maybe some two strategies or one or two strategies as it relates to, since we're talking about publicly funded public schools, funding public schools, what are some direct strategies that could accomplish some of those? It sounds like wraparound services for the family, and at the same time, the uplift of the community while improving the educational experience in the school. What are some pointed, here's what we could do as it relates to funding that, a strategy? That's what I'm kind of looking at tonight. How can we be thinking about strategy?
In 3 minutes?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
No,
We want to hear your pitch.
no. Look. Ultimately, at the end of the day, from my perspective, it's going to require state, local, federal, all firing at the same cylinder in a comprehensive strategy. But what I will say from a state perspective, one, it's fully funding Department of Human Services, making sure those monies that trickle down to the county human services are being used so they're fully staffed. Right now in Dauphin County, we do not have enough social workers per the demand that's going on in our community. What I would like to see is a strong partnership between our county human services and the school district, having more social workers in the school. If we have a kid that's acting up, falling asleep, hungry, we got to figure out what's going on at home, and then figure out what the best situation is for that family and that child. I am not for separating families. I want to keep families together, but in extreme circumstances, the government may have to intervene to just get everybody the help that they need or what it requires. Outside of that, again, we can talk about the funding and education reforms that may need to happen. I think right now we are entering this compromise. Will likely, if we want to put it to bed instead of having this fight every year, is going to require some reforms. And what I've been consistently calling for is there's no better group that I think can handle this from a state perspective than the Legislative Black Caucus. The Legislative Black Caucus is a very diverse caucus. If this is truly about Black and brown children, let us lead that conversation and that discussion and figure out what to do. We have a very diverse, we have progressives, we have moderates, we have conservatives within that caucus. I'd like to see us take the charge and lead with a dynamic plan for Pennsylvania and education portfolio in the next 10 years. Outside of that, when it comes to revitalizing the neighborhoods, I think local governments play a huge role here on their zoning boards. Making sure it's a reflection of what the community wants. But I think the biggest thing right now is we have got to tackle this housing crisis that we're seeing, making more affordable, quality, mixed-use housing and grocery stores and other things in the neighborhood. And I'm probably passing 3 minutes.
Pastor, just one other thing on that. I'm reminded of how you introed this, talking about, the current system that we have in 33 schools that aren't adequate in math and 6 who aren't adequate in reading, and how that's leading directly to prison. In my advocacy, one of the biggest predictors of educational success for kids was high quality childcare and high quality pre-K. Investing in those systems, high quality childcare, so parents can work and they don't have to worry about their kids being in an unsafe environment, right? Invest in high quality childcare. And part of that investment is making sure that childcare workers make more than $12.43 on average. I mean, that's pathetic. That is pathetic. I look at what other social democracies do for their children. I mean, and it even goes back further than that. Paid sick leave and family leave for workers. Increasing the minimum wage to literally put more money in people's pockets, right? And then investing in high quality pre-K. Every 3 and 4 year old kid, and pre-K is one of our most successful programs because it's also one of our most generous. A family of 4 making $80,000 a year can send their 3 and 4 year old child to pre-K. And pre-K, high quality pre-K can reduce the amount of number of IEPs that a child needs. It can increase graduation rates. It keeps kids out of jail. Now, there is some data that talks about 3rd grade fade out and things like that, and 3rd grade reading being a predictor, which you talked about earlier. So there is some of that data out there. But if we can get more kids, we are, just over 50% of our kids, our eligible kids, attend pre-K nationwide, or statewide rather.
Well, so here's my question about that. If that be the case, that's great. If you're a family of 4 and you make 80,000, but pastors who are here, I'm assuming you pastor people who $80,000 is as far as California is from Pennsylvania.
No.
So
But I'm
hold on,
saying if
hold
you
on,
make under
hold
that,
on.
you qualify.
Here's what I'm saying.
Up to $80,000.
So qualify for what? That means it's free.
Yes, it's free.
So we have pre-K opportunities.
Yes, pre-K counts. The pre-K counts program. Yes, absolutely. You can make up to $80,000. So anything under that qualifies, and it's wonderful.
Yeah,
but
that's a resource.
But here's a big problem when we talk about resources and benefits and things like that. The Child Care Works program, which is in conjunction with that on the child care side, that's only 125% of poverty. So you can only make up to like $48,000. So the two don't even match. They're literally supposed to be a continuum, one into the other, but they don't match up in terms of the eligibility requirements. So that's something that we have to work on with our federal partners on our end to see if we can get this to seamlessly match. But those are, and I've seen those outcomes. I mean, we've had the pre-K counts program now. We just celebrated, I think last year was 25 years of the pre-K counts program, 25 years of investments from the Rendell administration until now. Of high quality investments in pre-K. And that's, that can be one of the things that helps us equalize this whole system that is so out of balance where, and we have this reality where our zip code determines by and large our educational opportunities. But that can be a great equalizer if we just invest in it.
Yeah.
Representative Fleming, one of the things you said there I think is really powerful. There's a term for what Representative Fleming is talking about called benefit cliffs. And it's usually an unintended consequence when a bunch of different legislatures and a bunch of different years put programs together and the limits don't match. That's another place I would say where some bipartisan compromise can fix those things. We've done some of that in Pennsylvania. We need to do more. And that's a good thing. But again, I'm reminded that I'm in a church where we can talk about the best things.
Yes.
Jesus didn't say that heaven would never prevail against pre-K. Jesus didn't say that heaven would never prevail against the Capitol. What institution did he say the gates of hell would never prevail against? This church. And I'm sitting here in the presence of these congregations and I'm reminded of this man who invited me here and the life-saving work that's going on in his church. And he hasn't talked about it yet. And I don't know how many of you know about it, but what Pastor Josh Robertson is doing in a church just like this one is, I think, what the representatives are talking about in terms of early intervention in communities. And I would argue there is no institution that can do anything better. These are all good things, but there is no institution that can do anything better than the church. And I would love to see, as part of what we're discussing tonight, more churches like this one, like the Rock Church, like the many other churches represented, be empowered, be able to do what you're doing, Pastor Robertson. Because I've seen with my own eyes, and I think some of the representatives here that you invited have seen with their own eyes, how even in broken family circumstances, and we live in a broken world, even in a broken community like Allison Hill, and there are many broken communities in our state, your institution has a unique power. I'd like to see our public policy move further in the direction of empowering you and churches like yours to do more of what you're doing.
Thank you. Can I I'm gonna just take a moment. You may not know what we do at our church. We have a learning center. It is a full day program from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. Our students are enrolled in a public cyber charter school. So the curriculum and the instruction comes from an accredited public cyber school. And the kids come to our church and we hire members of the church to oversee their academic day and then provide extracurricular programs such It's homeschool. And in our first year, just to speak of results, in our first year, we had 30 students to attend our learning center. 29 out of those 30 students were failing when they came, and 22 out of the 30 finished on the honor roll at the end of the year. Right. In our second year, 51% of our students finished above a 90% GPA. Right. And so, and I think this is a great segue to, even as we talk about Lifeline scholarships. Now, I'm giving you an example of a non-traditional model that could add to the success that you're talking about with that early intervention. Because again, how many pastors do we have? Just raise your hand if you're a pastor in here. This is every bit of probably 20 pastors within a 30-mile radius that could host or have, 40 to 80 kids in your church doing the same program. But how do you start it? How do you scale it? How do you sustain it? For us, we've been blessed to do it through philanthropic contributions. But I think as we talk about Lifeline scholarships, as I understand it, with the passing of Lifeline scholarships, and I would like our lawmakers to explain this to us, a program like we have, a parent would have a voucher that could pay for that service. And so we don't have to, because the idea of lasting on philanthropic contributions 100% is just, that's not how the philanthropic world works. You have to find a sustainable way to keep your program going. Would Lifeline scholarships directly impact something like that a church may want to do? If they wanted to do education in their church, is something like Lifeline scholarships something that could work as a means to sustain those type of efforts?
So my answer is perhaps, but it depends. I guess the model we're talking about is a $10,000 voucher, right? What does it cost to educate one child at your learning center?
What does it cost to educate one child for a year?
Yes, for a school year.
How much do we make it work with, or how much does it really cost?
What is the cost? What is the actual cost per student cost? That's what we've been talking about.
So right now, about $5,500 a year per child. Something like what we do could be manageable.
Okay.
I don't think that's the best, but
So,
I'm just giving out a fair number.
So I am on record as saying, so the Lifeline scholarship conversation has been basically $100 million of Lifeline scholarships, which would provide students with a voucher to then attend a school of their choice. So, and I don't know if it's delineated whether or not it's a public or private school, because like you can, if you want to go to the neighboring public school district, you can do that, but you have to pay a tuition. So I know like the per student cost between public school districts, $10,000 isn't going to cover the full boat. And I am on record as saying, if we're going to put another $100 million, have another $100 million go to education, why don't we put it in $100 million in special education, or another $100 million in career and technical education? Because I think the path we're on, the basic education funding is we're putting a lot of resources in that line item. So there are 3 different line items basically that make up the collective school funding on an annual basis: basic education funding, special education, and career and technical education. So VOTAC essentially, to fund the career and tech centers. So I'm on record as saying, because hundreds of millions of dollars already go into private schools, if people choose to get tax credits to do that. We have 2 programs called the Educational Improvement Tax Credit Program and the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit Program, EITC and OSTC, that are programs that you can set. For example, the Silver Academy at the Jewish Community Center is in my district. And students are able to attend there with EITC, Educational Improvement Tax Credits. So
how would members of this body right here, how would they be able to participate in that program?
That's a really good, I think it's based upon businesses So basically the business contributes to the school, right? In order for the express purpose of allowing the school to fundraise to get more kids in, to increase enrollment. And then that business or person, it's actually business or personal entity, can get a tax credit for what they provide to the school. And that's how a lot of, schools are funded, private, parochial, and I'll even say, even on the public side, like we have the Hannah Education Foundation. The Hannah Education Foundation can receive EITC. I don't think they can receive Opportunity Scholarship, but EITC, Educational Improvement Tax Credits, our 501c3 foundation that's tied to the public school can receive those. But I will say, if we are going to have this conversation, we need to be really serious, because one of the other barriers is, in the public system, if a child lives within the school district borders, the public school cannot say, we will not accept you. There's no option to do that. Private schools can choose who they accept. Parochial schools can choose who they accept. So if we're going to have private schools take public dollars, then we need to have a conversation about who you can accept. Will you have the ability to say, no, we will not accept you through these doors?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's another part of that conversation that needs to be had.
Nick DeFentre, I don't mean to mess up your last name.
That's
Would you
okay.
say it for us? I'm sorry.
It gets chewed up all the time. It's okay.
Okay.
I'll still answer. Getting back to the scholarships and expanding it out just a little bit, and I want to go back to something that Representative Madsen said about, all these other issues we have to address in terms of affordable housing and a whole lot of other issues that come into play in the life of a student. And I think that, again, if we're going to be effective, what we have to remember is every option that we give kids, every option that we give to parents and families, address different circumstances. And just to go over a few of them, there are children right now in the community that are getting bullied in schools, and they don't have an option. They have to live with that.
Why don't they have an option?
I'm saying right now, they don't, there's an opportunity with a scholarship that maybe their parents could turn around and send them to a private school or something just to get them out of a bad circumstance.
Why don't they currently have an option?
Well,
So if you're, so help me understand this. If you're a parent and you have a child in the public school
correct.
who is being bullied,
Yes.
and they want to send their kid to another school,
Right.
what prohibits from them doing that?
The affordability of it.
So essentially, if a parent can't afford to pay for a private school, then they're locked out of that opportunity.
There are options that come off the table for them. And that to me is the point. There are options that come off the table.
Based off of affordability.
There are other scenarios that I'll play out. And one of the reasons why I get really passionate about education goes back to my days when I was county commissioner a long, long time ago. I had the oversight of juvenile probation. So I would take an opportunity to ride around with the juvenile probation officers and visit homes in the evening or visit the schools, because at that time we had probation officers in all the schools. And, you can't help but be moved when you show up at the house of a young woman who is on probation, without getting into any details about the why, and you think, what drives a student to that? And then you find out dad's not in the house, mom has intense mental health issues, younger sister is trying to be cared for, and this senior in high school is the head of the household. And nobody's going to know that except for a few caregivers maybe, and maybe some folks in the school. Now, there's another example of a life circumstance where if you had an option and could afford it, maybe then cyber school, staying home and taking care of your family, whatever, becomes a better option for you. And that's my point is, we're looking to protect an institution that has failed us. And that is the public school system. It has failed us. That's not to say it is a failure. It's simply to say that if we are going to solve this problem, we have got to look and say, what are we trying to achieve? A good quality education for every student. The more options we have, the better off we are. Even to heal and put public schools back to where they were. You have 3 public school students from Dauphin County sitting here. I loved my education. Representative Fleming said he loved his. Representative Madsen said I went to the same high school, Middletown. But, you know, so we love Susquehanna too, though. But the whole point is, if we keep focused on the prize, which is educating children, then again, we talk about more issues than just simply financing. We talk about, where are we letting these kids down? How is it possible that an entire school district can have 0 kids at proficiency levels? That to me is nearly impossible. So the more options, the more we're willing to talk, and not every option is going to be a good option. We're going to talk about some issues and we're going to throw them in the garbage can, and that's okay. At least we talked about them. But there are kids out there struggling every single day. There's kids, when I was in another high school where they had an alternative school, and kids would actually get into fights in the mainline school to get thrown into the alternative school because A, there was a lot more discipline in the alternative school, and B, the numbers were smaller, so they were getting more attention from their teachers. So kids were literally getting in trouble when they got out of the alternative school to get thrown back into it, so that because they knew that that was their best choice in education. That's sad. That option should be available to them no matter what. And so, again, what I'm saying is, I'm not here to tell you what the right answer and what the wrong answer is, because I don't think we've had enough conversation. For 20 years, more than that, but for 20 years for sure that I'm aware of, we've been talking about this problem, and we cannot move past square one. We are a divided society. And when it comes to our children, we can't be, and I got to say one more thing, and that is this. As a man of faith, there is no greater audience than congregations of faith throughout our community to cast aside the division, to cast aside the party, to cast aside team, and keep everybody focused on the mission. The churches have got to step up and be the voice of reason in a society that is so badly broken and so badly divided.
State Representative Dave Madsen.
Yeah, as a civil rights activist, I do want to say, just before we move on to the next thing, is when we're talking about public dollars going into private institutions, I have one but. When it's public dollars, it's everybody's dollars, right? It means gay people's dollars. It means Muslim people's dollars, right? So if these private institutions are going to take public dollars, they better let everybody in, unless they have real reasons not to. But if a girl goes to a religious school and gets pregnant halfway through their sophomore year, they better not get expelled.
Well,
So, and I want assurances
Sure.
that if a private institution gets public dollars, and remember, again, as a person of color myself, if they can do it to somebody else, that means they can do it to me and my family. And that's one thing I want to assure, that there are buffers, so that if a kid comes out as transgendered, they don't get expelled.
Well,
Because public schools can't do that.
well, here's the same, at the same rate, I think, and again, let me first say, Black Pastors United for Education is a nonpartisan organization. We're not for Democrats. We're not for Republicans. We are for people. We're for our kids. At the same time, I don't want my child being exposed to whatever it is outside of the sexual ethics that I want to teach my child at their school. I don't want that for my child. I don't want for my child, and again, I'm speaking for myself, and I want to know from you all how to handle this. Because if we're going to say that, if we're going to have private institutions taking public money and you can't discriminate based off of sexual ethics or those things, I also don't want my little girl going to a bathroom where a boy's in there, right? And I also don't want them teaching my child sexual ethics that don't comply with the sexual ethics I'm teaching my child. So I think there needs to be accountability with both, if we're going to say, if we're going to talk about discriminating kids, and I don't think that's the right word as far as kids that are in school. So what would you have to say about both of those? What does it look like? Again, tonight is not about accountability, it's about information, right? What does it look like for our public schools to hear the voices of parents and hear the voices? I'm sure I'm not the only parent who agrees with those things, and you may think differently about those things, but what does it look like to take into consideration both public and private schools, the voice of the people who's paying for it? So what does it look like? Again, what does it look like in our public schools and private schools? Because at the end of the day, they both educate our children, right? What does it look like for a parent to have a voice in both systems.
I
I don't know what that is, but hey,
I think
you know.
everybody's going to stand back and go, how do I answer this question? Look, and I'm going to walk carefully here because there has to be a distinction made between discrimination and a family's rights. So without any doubt whatsoever, a parental family right has to be maintained in that what you want your children exposed to or not exposed to absolutely must be respected. Now, the how is where it gets difficult, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same rate in our society, what I've also witnessed is a lot of people in the community casting that judgment, casting that discrimination that is also equally unacceptable in our community. Mm-hmm. And again, and if I could put it into sort of my beliefs in terms of religious terms, if you would, you know, there's a lot of Christian men and women that go around beating other groups up, ostracizing them, kicking them out, whatever it might be. That is not the Christ that I follow. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, he set standards for my life, mm-hmm. right? But I'm not supposed to go out and beat everybody else up. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be the light to the world, right? But now, what does that matter? I think our public policy has to kind of speak in that same terms. We have to be able to make a distinction between what is right for us and what is fair and right for everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so what we have to be able to do is come to the table, men, women, black, white, I don't care what the division is, Republican, Democrat, I don't care, and sit and be able to say, this is what's right for me, and I need to have the freedom to do that. But this is what's right for everybody else. And if I'm the outsider, then I've got to make decisions for my family that, again, allow me to go, whether that's a parochial school or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. I think, and again, I'm just going to stress this, I think the parental rights absolutely have to be respected, number one. But those rights can infringe on the rights of others.
Can I ask a question then?
Absolutely.
So if you are a parent, is this true? If we enacted something like Lifeline scholarships, which the way I understand it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, a high school student, a parent of a high school student will receive $10,000 for an entire year for them to go to school as a means of paying tuition at whatever school they would choose. If the kid is in grade school, it will be $5,000, if I'm understanding this correctly, for any school that they would choose to go to. If that money, as you said, State Representative Dave Matson, you said that dollar, public dollar, that taxpayer dollar belongs to all of us, then if that is in the hands of the parents' discretion, then doesn't the parent choose where they want that money to go? And then, so it's not on the school. If the school has a criteria for, this is what our criteria is if you come here, and the parent makes that choice to go there, then the dollar follows the choice of the parent.
So here's just
tell me if I'm right or wrong.
No, but I'll just give you a real example.
Okay.
Let's say we have a household, they're paying their taxes, but they're atheists and they don't like the public school. And then they say, I'd like to send my kid to a different school, but let's say in their area, there's just one or two options and they're religious schools. And on the form, it says, must be what is your denomination? And they put nothing or atheist. And then they get denied or their kid doesn't get access to the school. I just want assurances that there are buffers so that if that atheist family decides they want to choose a school outside of the public school, they have those options. Because again, they're paying taxes. I know we might not agree with atheists. I'm not an atheist, but they do pay taxes.
So here's my question then. Wouldn't the option be then for those who are in the atheist community to build their own schools, and it will be,
you want to find
no I'm not saying that that's the option. What I am saying is this, but no, I'm trying to ask,
are you advocating separate but equal?
I'm not,
Pastor Robertson?
I'm not. I'm trying to understand how, hear me. I'm trying to understand how Lifeline scholarships work. I'm not trying to get into the conversation of choices. I'm trying to understand how Lifeline scholarships work.
In our view, and in a view of a lot of folks, that's how it would work.
No.
These are public dollars
mm-hmm.
that if you choose to use them at if you take your voucher and go to another public school, it doesn't matter because they need to take any kid anyway. But if you choose to use your public dollars and go, because public schools are funded with public dollars, right? If you take your voucher public dollars and go to a private school that has rules about who they can let in and who they cannot, we're going to have a conversation about that.
Why?
Public is public and private is private. That's why. As long as you remain private, you can make any rule you want. But if you are going to accept public fund, and this is not out of bounds. This is not out of the realm of, we see it all the time. If institutions are going to take public money, then they can't discriminate, for example. They need to adhere to Title IX, for example, like colleges and universities, public or private. They take federal money, they take federal dollars, federal tax dollars. They cannot discriminate, and they have to adhere to Title IX. There is precedent for this. If you take public money, then you have to open your doors. You have to be open to accepting others who you may not agree with or the like.
And that's
because you were taking public money.
Okay. That's how Lifeline scholarships work. That's what you're telling me. Hold on, before we get to the crowd.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Well, and before, you know, I don't know if that's, we've never seen anything codifying Lifeline scholarships.
Well, we have other states.
So
Other states who have exacted that. Lifeline scholarships, though, right?
Right.
Can we
Well,
look at
voucher programs.
Yeah.
So Arizona, for example, and it's nearly bankrupting them. That's just one example.
Sure.
So, you know, if we want to have that conversation, my other hesitation about this is it's being couched as a program that'll help Black and brown kids. What if the take-up rates, because it may only be $10,000, which for a lot of, like, for example, a kid who's in the Philadelphia school district and struggling, right? They get their voucher. If we enact this, they get their voucher. They say, I want to go to St. Joe's Prep. St. Joe's Prep is $45,000 a year. How are they going to cover the remaining $35,000? They're not. So what choice do they really have? Right? And I'm just being real. My fear is that this is how this is being sold. Lifeline scholarships are being sold as something that will help Black and brown kids in the interim, right? And then we'll get 1-2 years down the road and we'll find, oh, the take-up rates among this population aren't really what we wanted them to be. We're going to have to open this up. And guess what? We're going to have to add another $100 million to this pool. I don't trust it.
Yeah.
I don't trust it at all. And again, if we are going to make more public dollars available, then let's invest them in the public system, because believe me, special education isn't funded to the level it needs to be. Talk to superintendents. The number of kids that come in with IEPs, individualized education plans, you know, the number of kids with intellectual and physical disabilities that are in our public schools that they have to take care of, the number of kids who are coming in not speaking English as a first language. There are plenty of investments we could make in special education or career and technical education to, as you said earlier, make sure kids are career ready.
Well, this is the reason why the conversation started with how do we properly fund our public schools. And I think those are two different conversations. I'm looking for, how does Lifeline scholarships work? And I get your apprehension to them, but the question is pointed. How does the Lifeline scholarship actually work? Charles Mitchell, you have your hand up. You want to speak?
Sure. Pastor, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because it doesn't exist. That's a factual answer. It should exist, I believe, but it doesn't exist. How would it work? I can answer that question.
Sure.
How it would work is, as Pastor Robertson said, a family would have $5,000 or $10,000, depending on grade level, to send their child where they want to go. And Representative, I heard what you said about St. Joe's Prep. I didn't get the chance to say this yet, but I'm also a public school kid. Love you, Dauphin County guys, but I'm from Delaware County, down Philadelphia. See, the attitude works, right? So my family members went to St. Joe's Prep. I have walked personally the halls of many schools, most of them associated with churches in Philadelphia, The kids that I know in those neighborhoods, respectfully, do not want to go to St. Joe's Prep. They want to go to school in their neighborhoods, just like the kids who go to your church to go to school, Pastor Josh. And I have walked the halls of schools, yes, in the most expensive city in our state, who provide a fabulous, Christ-centered, excellent education for $5,000 a year. I told you I'm Presbyterian. Most of those people are Catholic, and my hat is off to them, okay? So are there $45,000 a year schools? Of course there are. Most of the kids who I know who have told me that they would like for Lifeline scholarships to work, they would like for there to be such a program, want to go to school in their neighborhoods, and there are proven models, just like Pastor Josh's, that work. And I'll say two other things. Pastor, you asked about this matter of essentially what should the rules be if there were these scholarships for what students must be accepted.
Yes.
And the two representatives stated their views, and that's great. I'll state mine. I think two issues are being conflated here, unintentionally, with good intentions. I understand there are about 20 pastors in the room. You all seem to be very un-Presbyterian in your willingness to agree or disagree, and I love it. So I'm sure you will disagree if you disagree with what I'm saying. I'm sure you will voice it if you disagree with what I'm saying. I have never met a single pastor in my travels around this state who would ever remove a child from a school because she got pregnant. Never met one. I don't think that's what anybody's after. So I think we can take that issue off the table. I strongly doubt that any of the pastors here, if they had a school, would do that. The other matters that you brought up, Pastor Josh, look, I told you guys, you know where my cards are. I'm a Christian, I'm a Presbyterian. I would like for there to be more Christian schools. I would like for every church represented here who would like to have one to have one. But you know what else? I would like for there to be more atheist schools. I would like for there to be more Muslim schools. I would like there to be more schools where their bathroom rules might be different than the school that you and I would start, Josh. And again, I think there's a fundamental choice here. And the choice is this: how many of these decisions should be made by the people who are serving in important roles, I think in a conscientious way, as Representative Madsen and Representative Fleming are doing, and as Nick D would like to. I'm just going to call him Nick D so I don't trip on it, all right? How many of those decisions should be made by them, and how many should be made by you? To what degree should you have the authority and should you have the money to send the kid where you want to send him? And if you want your school to be Christian the way you think you need to be Christian, like Josh said, I think that should be your right. And I think we should give as much of that authority to you and to your churches and to the people of Pennsylvania.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to do what I know you all been waiting for, and that is to open up for a few questions or comments in light of education, not in light of accountability. These conversations, I think, are great because it gives us a chance to think and talk publicly about these things that are so important. There's some information that we're putting out right now. You'll see them. It's for information's sake. It's for you to think through, read through, and decide what you believe about it. But I'd like to open this time up for questions, for comments from our crowd. Can we just we'll use some of these mics. Yeah, you all can share. Yeah.
And I can project.
No, we'll bring a mic.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. They have mics. Yeah, leave them. You can leave them up here, Dr. Kears. Yes.
We're fine with two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gladys Brown Dutrell, also from Middletown. My question is, because I think these conversations are great, but I've also been part of these conversations for decades. Having worked in the General Assembly as an attorney, having worked on different pieces of legislation, having heard so many different comments that have come, because we're all very passionate about our kids and what we think is best for our kids. But I don't want us to forget, we're talking about a court case that says that we're not properly funding our schools. And I agree with that, but I can't figure out where the money is coming from. Because we're also dealing with so many different things in our communities and things of that nature. Like, where are we getting the money from? And I don't want us to lose sight of that. So I'm just throwing that out there because I hear things like, I hope that we have all kind of different private schools that we can create and everything else. And we have to remember that our schools currently are funded by taxpayer dollars. I mean, we currently in Pennsylvania can't get rid of the 1936 Johnstown flood tax. We can't get rid of it because it no longer goes to Johnstown. It goes into the general fund. So that's what I'm throwing out.
So it's
So the question is, where does the money come from?
yes.
That's the question. Okay.
Where can we get that money from? Right.
So the moment that we're in, it's almost as if it's divine providence, right? So and Charles's point is well taken.
We have to answer quickly too.
Right. This is all of our money. What I will say is we are currently we have a $7 billion rainy day fund. We have $7 billion on our balance sheet as we sit here today. Current revenue projections are above projections more than $700 million in the current fiscal year. So we actually have some of the capital to start dealing with this problem and many others right now as we sit here today. I don't know if you remember the Corbett administration, but back then there was no money. It was austerity was the word of the day. We are in the exact opposite place right now where the Commonwealth is liquid with funds. So we're in a unique position to be able to deal with this problem right now from a funding perspective.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
All right. So I pastor in York, but I am from Philadelphia. I went to Philadelphia public school system and then private school. But here's my question, because in Philadelphia, there's a lottery system. And what a lot of you don't know is in Philadelphia, you have to test into certain schools. So my question becomes, with the Lifeline Scholarship, how does that work? When you just said, for instance, my mother wanted to send me to Christian school. So in Philadelphia, with all those kids, how do you send, if I wanted to go to Masterman, which in Masterman, you have to have a certain GPA. So are we going to turn kids away who don't have a certain GPA? So again, the criteria, I'm just asking about the criteria. That if we're going to put it on also, the parent, take it out the parent's hand and say it's public dollars, are we then going to say then it's also, since it's public dollars, then GPA now comes into question? Are we also going to take into account that a lot of kids don't test well, have test anxiety? So again, how are we going to make that work? I'm just throwing that on the table, especially from Philadelphia. So
the question is, what are the parameters around the Lifeline Scholarship dollars? If that is passed, what are the parameters around there to make sure that essentially wrongful discrimination doesn't happen by choosing that option? Am I understanding your question correctly? But from educational. Okay. Sure. Yep.
The program, as it's been proposed, Pastor, is in legislation in the Senate, which Nick D would like to join, introduced by a senator from Philadelphia. Yeah, it's a statement of fact, isn't it?
That's what he does.
All right. I mean, I don't know. Is he? Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm in trouble with these guys. Anyway, whatever Nick wants to do is his problem. All right. What I want to do is I want to help children. So Senator Tony Williams from Philadelphia has introduced this bill now with $300 million. It's not for Masterman, to my pastor friend. It's for, I'll give you an example, Little Flower. Little Flower is a high school in the Hunting Park neighborhood of Philadelphia. It's private. It holds 2,000 girls. Hunting Park, if you don't know the neighborhood, it's renowned for its prostitutes. So when you drive up to the school, you see people who have they don't feel they have a chance to make money any other way. It grieves your heart when you see it. Okay, but there's 400 girls in that school who are trying to make a better life for themselves in a really tough neighborhood, but the school holds 2,000. The idea would be girls show up to that school, not to a public school. It's intended as a scholarship to an excellent private school. Little Flower is just one example. But that's, so yes, there are magnet schools and other schools like that that have those requirements. Most of the schools that I'm talking about, like Little Flower, they'll let anybody in who wants to be there.
So will we, my question again, will we, with the school district and with other school districts that work that way, will we in return remove those requirements being at the end that he just threw out, that you don't want to put in the hands of, in private school, we have, discrimination, that type of bill. But then are we going to then tell the schools that you have to remove the testing into schools or the lottery system? Are we going to hold those standards across the board even?
So let me say this. Great question. I think that is a layer that is a little deeper than understanding how the Lifeline Scholarship works. I think we're looking at funding models for how the scholarship works. I think you're asking a question of regulation, which is great, public school regulation, private school regulation. I just think that's a different question. So I appreciate it. I think it's for a great discussion, but more so we're asking, how does that work as far as funding is concerned?
Josh?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to speak to that. His question is, it's an absolutely legitimate question. You're talking about criteria. My name is Tamika Hatcher. I'm the vice president of the Susquehanna Township School District, lifelong resident of Dauphin County, graduate of Stilton High-Spire High School. It's very good that we're talking about this Lifeline Scholarship, and it is an option for some, like should this legislation get passed and it go down that way. But let's not get hung up in our discussion this evening, even as we're exploring Lifeline and what it means. Don't be deceived about any type of charter or voucher program. It's not going to fill the gap for everybody. The predominant, vast majority of students go to public school. We're talking about public dollars. So where we're focusing our public dollars, we're going to have to focus how we distribute those dollars and repairing those gaps within the public educational system. $10,000 on a Lifeline scholarship, whether you take that, I think Bishop McDevitt costs $13,000 a year. So let's just say you're a parent who's struggling to pay full tuition right now. You're not Catholic. You're sending your kid, like one of my best girlfriends does. Her daughter goes to McDevitt. She works 2 and 3 jobs to send her to Bishop McDevitt. If she were able to get $10,000, okay, she'd have to make up the difference in the 3. But what about her son who's not able to test into Bishop McDevitt? Pastor, respectfully, there's always going to be criteria. We cannot get around criteria. There's going to be criteria, whether you're talking about a public school or private school. If we're looking at the way our public school model is in Pennsylvania and the way our tax is set up, you have to go to your neighborhood school because that's where you live. So even if you took this Lifeline scholarship to go to another public school outside of your neighborhood, they're going to have limits. There's going to be criteria for how many students they're going to take from outside of other school districts, how many scholarship students they're going to take. And if your kid is coming from one of these 33% of high schools who are at 0 grade level in math, or one of the 6 high schools that have 0 students testing at grade level in reading, they're not getting in. So what does that mean? What do we have to do? What we have to do is take the money. If my kid is, okay, it's great for me, and I don't knock the charter system. Like, I believe in options. I think parents should have some choice, but we have to understand that that only works for a very, very small minority of us. We have to look at public education and repairing that system. Thank you.
And I wholeheartedly, I appreciate those comments, especially coming from someone who's an administrator in our public school. And I think I started the conversation with, how do we rightly fund our public school? And I would love to hear more conversation. You good, my sister. I would love to hear more conversation around public funding, such as, we didn't mention much about property tax and maybe, rezoning and things like that could make that possible to fund our public schools rightly. I'm sorry, we have one more hand in the back. I'm sorry, my sister. I know. My sister. I know, my sister. I'm so sorry. We have another comment in the back. I'm so sorry. I know.
My name is Curtis Terrain. My kids go to Middletown. My son graduated with distinguished honors from Dauphin County Technical School, so very proud of him. I'm the average guy. I don't have a bunch of titles and stuff like that. I'm the average guy. I'm one of the guys that I'm a father of 7 children. 3 of them live in my home. Okay, and I just want to know where the responsibility lies. If you're telling me that 0 kids graduated, 0 kids passed these tests. Whose job is to make sure that they're supposed to pass these tests? And how come they still have a job? If I go to work and I don't do the things I'm supposed to do, I don't have a job the next day. So I understand, I hear the money and I understand this may be a little out of content, but I'm just a layman. So you have to explain to me slowly. How does it work where you are feeding money into, then you're saying you want to take the money that was in this, you want to take money and give us vouchers to go to someplace else. I'm a construction worker. We build from what we have. You keep it where you got, you build it up. I don't want to go somewhere else. I don't want to send my kids somewhere else. Get the people who are doing their job wrong out and build from there. You start from the ground up. You don't go somewhere else to try to make them better. The problem that we have is the young men and women that are incarcerated, you send them out to different little towns. And then those little towns, they get the funding because they get counted as people there. If you really want to change it, when they go somewhere else, they should still get counted in Philly, in Harrisburg, in Lancaster, in Reading. They should still get counted there so that federal funding still stays in their neighborhood. So although they're going, their children get their education in the cities that they come from. We're getting robbed when you send them way out somewhere and then they don't get that money. That money goes to Podunk, Pennsylvania somewhere where nobody's ever heard of them. So can somebody explain to me, how does that work where we're standing here trying to go somewhere else and we're robbing our own community because we're leaving the community, yet you want us to come back and build it? I'm confused. So can somebody explain that to me, please?
Sure. So we'll explain it at the next town hall. It is past our time. I'm so tragically sorry. So hold on. Let me tell you why. Number one, we promised that we would be done at 8 o'clock. It is 8:06. We are past our time. But what I'm hoping that we see, congregation, just give me a second. Congregation, can y'all just give me a second? Give me a chance. What I'm hoping that we see is that fundamentally we have some students who are excelling and doing well, and we have some students who are not. And I think all of us in here are concerned about both. And I think all of us in here need to do our homework on both issues and all of these issues to figure out what do we fundamentally believe so that when it's time to vote, we're voting based off of our convictions and not just our party affiliations. That's what the town hall meeting is meant to do. Will we do it perfectly? No. Will every comment be what you like? No, right? No, that won't happen. But can we start having public dialogue around these things, because it's too important for us and too important for our children's future to not have the conversation, right? So no. I'm sorry. No more comments. Here. I got one more thing for us before we end. I think tonight, and the fact that we have people who still have questions and want to have commentary, shows you that how much this is needed, right? How much this open dialogue is needed, and how much we appreciate our lawmakers and those who are leaders within our Commonwealth that would champion these conversations. But I have one more thing for us this evening. Number one, if you would like more information with what Black Pastors United for Education is doing, there's a QR code that is matriculating throughout the congregation. You can take your phone and get the QR code, and our information will come up. We will send you information on a monthly basis, not too regular, just based off of what we're doing. And so you'll know about the town halls, when we're having them, and how you can be a part. But tonight, I also want to show you all the power of churches working together, pastors working together. Last week on Monday evening, we had a town hall meeting in York, Pennsylvania, at New Covenant Community Church, Bishop Tony Cease. And at the end of that town hall meeting, our organization, Black Pastors United for Education, granted them a $40,000 grant to do their summer program, right? So that they could have money to run a summer program out of their church, right? I think that that is remarkable, y'all, right? Not a loan, but a grant. But we are also looking to partner with other Christian-based service organizations. And there is an organization here tonight that we want to surprise. And I would like a representative from Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Would you come to the front? We have a surprise for this service organization tonight who has been working in our community for many years, providing, you all remember, and the fraternity is known by more than this, but you all remember the Manna Cafe, right? Right? The Manna Cafe was my first job as a teenager, right? Just 5 or 6 years ago. And so this has been an organization and a staple in this community for decades now. And so we want to recognize them and honor them for their contribution to our people in Harrisburg and the surrounding areas through the state of Pennsylvania. And here's our bossilist, Brother Eugene Spells, but we want to bless this organization with $10,000 grant tonight. So a little context. We've been working together because we want to provide opportunities for our youth to learn entrepreneurship, to learn different businesses. And this service organization has been providing this type of work, and we want to encourage that type of work. And I think this is, again, the power when pastors start putting our mind together and congregations put our mind together and our resources together, we can do something special together, right? And so I think we should put aside our political affiliation and put aside even our denominational affiliations in order to come together to serve our community together, right? So I want to bring Pastor Jameson McLaughlin back to the mic. He is the pastor of this great church who hosted us this evening. Thank you, Goodwin Memorial Baptist Church, for hosting us this evening. Can we say thank you to our panelists this evening who came? Right. I'm going to ask Pastor, would you come and lead us in a word of prayer, give us final remarks, lead us in a word of prayer as we leave this place.
Before I pray, I want to ask you, Pastor Robertson, can we give God some praise for him and him being a visionary, an advocate, and activist? I too was open to us going till 8:30, but I'm going to respect the host. Can you please tell us when is the next town hall meeting, as well as topics that will be discussed, so that the people here who are passionate about this community and about education, they can know when the follow-up conversations will be?
That's a great question. Any pastors in Harrisburg want to host a meeting like this? I think we could start there. We can have a conversation after this, but we don't have another one scheduled. But I think you're seeing how it's needed, right? It's needed to have these conversations. What I promised our lawmakers was that this would be a conversation about information and not about accountability for prior decisions or even future decisions. But we need our lawmakers to educate us. And so I think we need more conversations like this. And as pastors are willing to host them, Black Pastors United for Education is willing to come alongside and have more public dialogue. Issues to come. I want to know, I would like to ask more questions about how public schools are properly funded. I would like to know more about Lifeline scholarships. We didn't even get to cybers and charters tonight. But I think that those are the conversations. I think that There's more and more conversations about these voucher systems throughout the country, not just the state of Pennsylvania. And I think we need to have a conversation about how do they work, how are they executed, what are the implications. So I would say mainly those three things. Oh yes, on June the 11th, which is a Tuesday at 2:00, Black Pastors United for Education will be hosting a press conference at the Capitol with a letter that we have written to our governor, asking our governor to consider some things as it relates to education reform. We're asking that everyone that could be there would be there as we petition our governor and our lawmakers to consider some of the requests that we have as a constituency as it relates to public funding of education and the laws that govern education in Pennsylvania. So June the 11th at 2:00 at the Capitol. If you could be there with us, that'd be great. We'd love for that to happen. Thank you. In the main rotunda, that's where that is. Also, if you know any churches in the Philadelphia area or surrounding area, Philadelphia, on June 15th, we are having a black tie event at the Philadelphia Arts Ballroom. And this will be an opportunity for Black Pastors United for Education. We are going to grant 10 churches that are selected a total of $200,000 to do after-school programs, summer programs, different type of educational opportunities that will be hosted within churches. If your church has a vision for educating children, you should apply immediately. The deadline is June 1st. The application process is very simple. But if you know a church in the Philadelphia area or surrounding areas, I haven't defined surrounding areas, right? So, but again, this grant money will be coming from Black Pastors United for Education. What we're trying to do is get resources in the hands of pastors and congregations that have vision but need provision, financial provision, right? And so I think we're better together if we share. So those are two things please keep on your radar. Thank you.
Thank you again, Pastor Robertson. Thank you to our panelists. And one more time, can we give them a round of applause for their willingness to speak? I also want to thank you for being here. The saying is trustworthy and true. It takes a village to raise a child. Yeah. And I often say, in order for our schools, our families, our communities to get better, it must be all hands on deck. So often I see people blaming the teachers for all that goes wrong in our school system, when in reality, change starts with me. If I was preaching, I'd say, I can't get no help up in here. But I thank you all for caring about this community. I want to thank our audiovisual ministry who was present tonight. They made sure this was live streamed on Facebook and YouTube for those watching online. And I'm thankful in advance for the change that shall take place. I believe things will get better. Amen? Amen. Congratulations to Kappa Omega chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated and to all of those who have received benefits. Let's pray. God, we thank you tonight for all that has been said and done. God, we pray for this community. We pray for those who are seeking provision. We pray for those who are seeking comfort. Lord, there are some families out there right now that need your grace and your mercy. And so, God, we pray that you use each and every person, every family in this room to help build this community. God, we thank you for all that has been done, and we are excited about what shall be done. And so, God, we praise you and say thank you in advance. We give you glory and we shout hallelujah because, God, we believe things will get better. But in the meantime, in the in-between time, God, give us the strength, the courage, and the faith to press forward. We love you, God. We love one another, and we love this community. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. God bless you. Thank you all for coming.
Brothers of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, would you come to the front for a moment before you leave? Can I give you my card?